So what we're going to do here is go over some code in that. So this is a code fragment out of a solution. So we have an app that has a war top and a war map, and we also have a sort of a custom war pop-up view, which just has a basic Easter egg toolkit pop-up view inside it with some anchors. We're just going to go over the war map part so that we can sort of see how an identify works on a geo view. So this is just the header and the imports. So we have a standard Easter egg map view here. Again, because it's from our examples in the past, we anchor to the left and right of the parent and the bottom of the parent, but leave the top ambiguous because that'll be hooked to war top later on. We give our map view an ID, and we set its map equal to a map in ArcGIS Online. That's the ID, asset ID there. And so this is where I tie into the on mouse clicked event of the map view. I got a couple logout messages just so that I can see in the console I'm about to perform an identify and on what layer I'm performing it on. Now I know that this particular map only has one layer in it, one hosted feature layer, so I get the first layer and that sort of thing. Well, here I'm just getting the name. I'm going to get the layer again later on and that. And I set a tolerance that we talked about in a lecture. And remember, a value through 1 through 10 seems to be stable. I was using bigger numbers because I wasn't getting a hit, but so I guess there's some sort of limit in that. And return pop-ups only, I said false, because at first when I'm debugging, I just brought everything back just in case I was missing something that I needed. Okay, but once you get it working, you could probably set it to true if you just need the info. Don't need the geometry, just need the info. And then I go map view identify layer singular, and if I call that method on a geo view, which map view is, I have to send in what layer do I want to identify. So go get the first layer out of the map. Now I got to send in the mouse X and the mouse Y, which are the pixel values of where I clicked. A really good question here that I didn't cover in lectures. Where the heck did mouse come from? So on mouse clicked is a signal, aka an event, and part of what gets passed into this signal or is globally floating around is the mouse event called mouse, and it has the X and Y that you clicked on the app. I send in the tolerance, right, and whether I return pop-ups only, currently set to false, which means basically bring back everything. And so that is how I hook into the user tapping onto the screen, getting where they tapped, and starting an identify. What I need to do now is hook into the event on identify layer status changed, okay, singular, because I'm only identifying one layer. I log out what that status is just for some debugging information. And if it is completed, it's because sometimes these are local and sometimes you're going over the internet and doing the identify that way. And so it can take some time. So whenever it's done and it was completed, hopefully successfully, right? And that I log out. Well, how many hits did I get? Which means on the layer identify result singular because I'm identifying one layer. I go get the geo elements and I said, well, how many came back? Okay, because it could be I could tap and not get a hit. And so only if the length is greater than 0 am I going to do something in my case here. Because for it to be greater than 0, right, means that I did get a hit. I did actually tap near a feature and it did trigger a result. And so I do have geo elements to look at. And then what I do is I'm going to pop up a war pop-up, which is in another QML file. It just has, all it really has is an pop-up view from the toolkit variable and the anchors of where I want it to show up on the screen. And that. And so here I'm going to create on the fly a pop-up basically So create an object via the runtime. What type of object? A pop-up object in that. And based on what geo element, go get the first one out of the list. I could have hit on a bunch. I'm only going to pop up the first one though. And also set the war pop-up definition title to war pop, right? So you'll see that in the title bar of the pop-up view eventually. I also create another object. So ArcGIS runtime, create an object, the pop-up manager. And I can't create a pop-up manager unless I have a pop-up, and then the pop-up has the geo element. So I can't create a pop-up manager without a pop-up. I can't create a pop-up without a geo element to base it on. Because the info for the pop-up view is going to be based on the column values for a particular geo element, aka feature in our case. Right? On my war pop-up view, I set the pop-up manager to that I just created. And I tell the pop-up view to slide horizontal. Now there's two things going on here. We probably saw in lecture, we saw like show pop-up, dismiss pop-up. So what slide horizontal does, it does a show pop-up, but with an animation where it slides in from, let's say, the left in our case. Okay. Otherwise, not only did I not get a geo element selected or identified, and not only did it complete, it errored out. So if it errored out, right, log out that something went wrong. So this is kind of a very terse, concise, clean sample. So we'll just go over it one more time. We have a map view that has a map based on a map in ArcGIS Online. On the map view, we're going to capture when someone taps conceptually on it with their finger or clicks with the mouse, right? And that's going to trigger us doing an identify. So map view, identify one layer. And so if you're going to do that, well, what layer are we talking about? Go get the first layer out of the map. And here's where they click, the X and the Y. Here's my fuzzy kind of tolerance and whether I want just the pop-up or the pop-up with the geometry as well. I have the tie into this on, identify, later stays changed. Be careful that there isn't, I do believe there is an on, identify layers, plural, state is changed. In case you did a map view, identify layers versus a map view, identify layer. So this is really where you can really trip yourself up. And just know, from the beginning, am I doing singular or plural, and make sure we're tying into the right events. Okay. So when someone taps, this will trigger here, but we've already hooked in. So this is like our fire. This is what's going to fire things off. This is our hook, fire, respond kind of deal, right? And so when the identify layer has changed, and we'll see that it's starting to do the starting the identify, it's completed the identify, and we want it to complete successfully, not error out. We'll find out, well, did I select zero features or one feature or many features? At least I'll print that message out so I know what happened. But only if I have one or many features will I try to pop a pop-up, okay, in a pop-up view. So if I do have, if I did safely, without an error, identify at least one feature, right? Create a pop-up based on that feature, that geo element, right? Quickly tweak the title to war pop. I then base a pop-up manager based on that pop-up. And I create a pop-up view, which is technically created in QML, but I slide out its pop-up manager. And this gets into this thing that whenever you change the geo element, you have to recreate the pop-up manager and reset it on the pop-up view. And then I tell the pop-up view to slide horizontal. Well, that does two things. It really says show the pop-up view, but do an animation where it slides out from the right towards the left, right? Now, if there was an error, which would be really weird on identify, you're usually either going to get a hit or not get a hit, but something could have went wrong. Print that error out to the console. Okay. So that's all I wanted to go over in this video, is how an identifier works. And it never hurts to go back. We definitely have to have a map view, and that has to have a map, because eventually we're going to query a layer in the map. We need to tie into the on mouse click, so when someone taps on the view, so we can grab the X and Y and then perform the identify on a particular layer. You can do a drill through on a whole bunch of layers, but it would be identify layers, and then you would tie into a different signal here. But when that identify layer state is changed, so the identify layer above method goes out, right, gets processed and comes back, and if it comes back successfully completed, it can still get 0 hits, but it will say that it's actually completed. Then we can go check out the identify layer result to find out how many things came back. It could be 0, right? Maybe we tapped in an area where there were no features. Then we'll create our pop-up. We'll create our pop-up manager, and we'll set the pop-up views pop-up manager to the pop-up manager that we just created. And in this case, we're going to slide it out from the right to the left, roughly about center, or a little bit more, and display the information. So what's the default operation now in the toolkit's pop-up view is to go through each column value on a feature and print out the column name and its values side by side, much like an identify in ArcMap or ArcPro. But for now, this concludes this video.